Thank you. And thanks for the introduction, and thanks to the Military Cyber Professionals Association for inviting me here today. I'm going to give you a look at this topic, information operations, from what you can call either a journalistic perspective or, if you prefer, an open source intelligence perspective, an AUSA perspective. Churchill famously said that in wartime, truth is so important that it must be surrounded by a bodyguard of lies. And it seems to me that lately, as we look at information operations, we're increasingly seeing lies surrounded by a bodyguard of truth. So I'm going to speak briefly. I'm going to pose a few questions to you at the end of it all, and hope we can have a brief discussion of what we might be seeing these days. About 3 weeks ago, I was at the Billington Cybersecurity Summit listening to General Votel, Commanding General of CENTCOM, speak. And he was there talking about cyber operations from his perspective as a theater commander, as a major combatant commander. And they were, from his point of view, important. He spoke at some length, and he spoke, I thought, pretty intelligently. He said three things that I thought were particularly interesting. He said, and I'm quoting him here, "As we've taken away the physical caliphate, a virtual caliphate has arisen. We need to defeat ISIS in cyberspace." He's under no illusion that ISIS has any significant hacking capability, but nonetheless, they've got to be defeated in cyberspace. He went on to say that ISIS' most significant capability is its ability to shape the information environment. And by that he means principally things like recruiting, like inspiration, the sort of things we see as you see the groups metastasize around the world. You've got a bunch of terrorists acting without any central command and control, acting essentially under inspiration. And he saw their ability to shape the information environment as crucial to their success. And then he said something very interesting. He concluded by saying, "My number one priority in cyber is mission assurance." Okay. That made me think a little about Clausewitz. And there are two things about Clausewitz that everybody knows, and only one of them is true. The one thing that is true is that Clausewitz really did say that war is the continuation of politics by other means. The other thing everybody knows is that Clausewitz said that war had to be fought in an absolute way. There could be no limitations on war whatsoever. So you'll see books and articles with titles like Apostle of Total War, things like that. That's just wrong. That's incorrect. And what Clausewitz did say was that the idea of war had no limits, but that ideal war and real war were very different things. Can I have the next slide? We all remember from high school physics, what were one of the first things the physics teacher said introducing the lesson? He would have said things like, "Assume this is a frictionless surface." Okay, you all remember that? So it's a simplifying assumption he introduces to introduce an idea. And that's what Clausewitz is talking about. So as the difference between ideal physics and the physics of the real world, what's the difference? It's friction. So too in war. And Clausewitz is very consistent in this. He says that what distinguishes war and the ideal from actual war is friction. And what he means by friction are things like orders being misunderstood, a courier getting lost, darkness, fatigue, fear, bad weather, mud that makes it impossible for you to move the guns. That kind of thing is friction. And the difference between the idea of war and real war is friction. It seems to me that this basically divides national styles of war into roughly two categories. You can approach war either by deciding you're going to increase the enemy's friction as much as you can, or you're going to reduce your own friction to the absolute minimum. I think the American style of war is to reduce your own friction. That if we are given our way, I think the natural way most American officers are going to approach war is to come at it by saying, I want to do what I'm going to do, and the enemy is not going to be able to stop me from accomplishing it. Or another way of putting it, as I think General Votel did, is my number one priority is mission assurance. I want to reduce my own friction to the minimum. So what's this got to do with information operations? These are two common definitions, doctrinal definitions of information operations. There's a lot mixed in with that. Look at the different things that are rolled into one. Electronic warfare, psychological operations, deception, operational security, computer network operations, that is hacking, offensive cyber operations. All of that's rolled into information operations. It's a complex definition. It could be hard to pull all of that together into something that makes sense as a single sort of variety of operation. So what I'd like to do is propose an alternative way of thinking about information operations and specifically influence operations. I'd suggest that influence operations are marketing and battle dress. And as a corollary to that, fundamentally what you're doing with influence operations is you're attempting to increase the enemy's friction. You want to make it harder for the enemy to do what he is intending to do by affecting his beliefs, by making him want different things than what he wants, by doing all of that kind of stuff. It's a complex task and a complex problem. Any marketing professional will tell you that the media have changed. There are a lot of different things going on with the media now. The days of the classical press, as we like to think we remember it, are largely gone, insofar as they ever really existed, where you have this sort of independent, autonomous profession that's out in a disinterested sort of way seeking facts. I don't know that we have that anymore. What we do have are new media increasing in their influence. We have old media declining, that there is with the recent scandals over Harvey Weinstein, people are talking about the Condé Nast publication empire as basically devolving into a set of blogs, which is why editors are leaving, they're cutting back on personnel. And when we're seeing increasingly with social media, with platforms like Twitter, is that there's no media at all. There's no mediation between people talking to each other online. And there's a curious kind of disinhibition that comes with that. So it's a very different kind of environment. So we've been on the receiving end of a lot of information operations recently over the past year. ISIS, to be sure, is addressing and inspiring the terrorist diaspora. There are a lot of lone wolves out there that ISIS is howling to. We've seen a lot of influence operations out to disrupt Western societies. We've seen a lot of Russian operations. We saw a lot of Russian operations during the election. What's the goal of that? Is the goal to achieve any particular political result? I don't think so. I think when you look at the evidence, what you see the goal there is, I think the goal of the Russian influence operations, as they played out in the United States in particular, has been simply to disrupt, to cause chaos. That it's not so much that they're particularly interested in putting any one person in office as they want to disrupt people's faith in the sort of civil society and the civic institutions that people have hitherto reposed their trust in. And to do that, they're working with propaganda. And in this kind of propaganda, there is an awful lot of truth-telling that goes on with the telling of the lies, that the lies need a bodyguard of truth for themselves to be effective. And again, there's a long history of this. Next one. I've got a couple of examples of Second World War propaganda, Axis propaganda. This is Italian propaganda directed against Americans, and we all know what that is, right? That's Franklin Roosevelt smiling as the bombs are falling down destructively. The quotation under there roughly means, to say my own mastery is smile enough for me. That's a quotation from the fascist poet and writer Gabriele D'Annunzio. So what do you see there? You see a pretty good representation of Roosevelt as the famous Roosevelt smile, and you see a manifestation of the American way of war, that typical logistics-intensive, firepower-heavy way of war that we waged. Next slide, please. The next one is even uglier. This is a propaganda poster from the Dutch Nazis during the time when the Netherlands were occupied, and Arthur Seyss-Inquart, who was subsequently tried and executed in Nuremberg, was the Reich commissioner. And it shows a caricature of the liberators, that is us, and how we're waging war. There are a number of interesting things about this. The figure's got 6 limbs, so it's like a big bug. Think of a huge menacing locust or a louse or a flea, some large destructive insect. Its feet are bombs. They're smashing Europe's heritage. It has its head is in a Ku Klux Klan hood. That whenever the the Axis wanted to take a shot at American culture, there was always an association with the Klan. There are references to lynching, to pop music. The cage in the middle, at the heart of the beast, has monkeys that are labeled jitterbugging. The woman in Indian headdress at the top is a Miss America figure. There's a pop music record being held in one hand. There's a drum being beaten for value in advertising. There's a convict's hand holding a gangster's Tommy gun. And the banner on the one leg says world's most beautiful leg. So you have a caricature of all of the vulgarity and violence and unattractive features of American culture. Are any of those things true, or rather false in detail? Actually not. No, those all reflected aspects of American culture. Does that change the moral reality of the Second World War? Also no. These are lies in the service of truth, rather, in the service of lies. This is continuing. Next slide. This is from last week. This is RT, which the publication formerly known as Russia Today. It is a Putinist news outlet that basically pushes the Russian information operations line. What they're doing here is they're mocking a CIA recruiting effort where they're attempting to recruit Russian language speakers to the CIA to help make the world a better place. How are they going to do that? Presumably by doing something bad to Russia. This is pretty slick. You know, note the slogan, "Question more," is RT's slogan. They have all the appearance of a legitimate source of news. They do legitimately report some news. There's a lot of factual reporting that goes out in RT. They were very good, for example, a few months ago on the arrest of some former Kaspersky employees on charges of espionage. So they're not bad all the time. And they're also surrounded by advertising. If you were to scroll farther down on the screen, if you go to that live on the site, you would see all the usual internet ads for the shocking pictures you won't believe, the one weird trick, what to tell your parents to prepare them for retirement, all of the stuff that comes with every other news site you see. Russia Today. Next, please. So these are my questions that I pose for all of you. There's a lot of talk about rumor control, controlling fake news. Are there ways of doing that where we could get away with that without curtailing free speech, without doing violence to the First Amendment? I don't know. I think that's an unanswered question. I'll give you one possible answer that I've heard from Michael Chertoff on a number of occasions. He points out that while natural persons, and indeed even corporate persons, have First Amendment rights, he's not aware of any First Amendment rights that bots have. So maybe you want to control bots. How do we do it? Could we find a technical means of controlling bots, which provide a lot of the amplification for information operations online? Maybe that's possible. To take one recent case, you remember the FCC's solicitation of comments on the net neutrality rules over the last several months? How many of the replies they received, would you guess, were produced by bots? The answer shocked me. More than 80% of the comments they received were bot-generated, which makes me think that maybe the FCC needs to work on its CAPTCHAs. I don't know. Maybe that's something we could do, but how do you accomplish that? We've heard a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Could we train AI to do this for us? And Facebook and Google have relied upon this approach considerably. It seems not to be working particularly well for them. I don't know how well that will work. For one thing, AI requires training by natural intelligence, by human beings, and we know that human beings have plenty of their own issues. So what is there to convince us that the AI is going to get this right? And finally, and this is the big question I have for all of you, anyone who's interested in information operations, how is it that the country, that is us, that invented mass marketing, is so cover your eyes awful at information operations? We have created means of creating desires and selling things for every imaginable audience, every imaginable market that you can think of, and yet we can't seem to win this kind of information operations engagement. The Russians seem to be able to do this, and they've done this for a long, long, long time. And one of the first large-scale information operations, and one that has probably produced as much suffering as any document in the course of human history, is the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was a late 19th century forgery by the Tsar's secret police. So I put that question to you: why is it that we are outmaneuvered in influence operations constantly by people who can't sell anything? Thanks very much, and let's talk about that.